So today we have verses 1.2.7 to 1.2.11 of the Kathopanishad lined up. I will start with verse number 7. I will read. Shravanay api bahubhiyah na labhya Shranvant api bahav yam na vidayu Ascharya vakta kushal asya labdha Ascharya gyata kushalanushishtah. So the verse translates to Yam is, of course, speaking even today's set of verses. Many do not even hear of it, that Paramatman, the soul, the eternal soul. Even on hearing, many do not comprehend it. Amazing is the one who describes it, and proficient is the one who understands it. Remarkable is the one who experiences it, and skillful is the one who follows the teachings of a proficient teacher. So let's take this up word by word. Shravanai, to hear. Api, even. Bahu, be is by many. Bahu is many. Bahu, be becomes by many. Yaha, that. Paramatman. Na labhya, labhya is to attain. So na labhya becomes not attain or not available. Shravantaha. So having heard. Api, even. Baha, va is many. Yam, whom, not. Vidayu, known. Ascharya is amazing or wonderful beyond beyond our comprehension or excellent. So Ascharya is amazing. Vakta is one who speaks or talks about it. Kushal is someone who's proficient. Asya, to this. Labdha is the recipient. Ascharya, translating again to amazing or wonderful. Gyata, who comprehends and understands. Kushala Nushishta, when taught by a proficient teacher. Therefore, the verse translates to many do not even hear of the eternal soul. Even on hearing, many do not comprehend it. Amazing is the one who describes it. Proficient is the one who understands it. Remarkable is the one who experiences it. And skillful is the one who follows the teachings of a proficient teacher. So let's read it together. Shravanay api bahubhi yah nalabhya. Shranvant api bahav yamna videyu. Ascharya vakta kushalasya labdha. Ascharya gyata kushala nushishta. So see how many of us actually hear about this knowledge or of the eternal soul. Of course, in India, we are blessed because we are familiar with the concept of the eternal soul since we are exposed to it since our childhood. We hear it's part of our tradition. We hear our parents and our grandparents talk about it. So we do hear about it. So we are aware. The awareness is there. But how many of us actually manage to understand it? And even those who claim that they know, how many can actually explain it to others? For the student to understand, like Nachiketa, the student must show deep interest in the knowledge. And Lord Ram, therefore, is telling Nachiketa that if anybody can talk and make you understand what it is, that person would be a great wonder indeed. And if anyone can receive this knowledge, that student must also be a great wonder. A wonder indeed is the person who has understood it, and a wonder indeed is the person who is able to express it in an intelligible style. It is an extremely subtle subject. And therefore, you may recollect Chapter 9 of the Bhagavad Gita was termed the Raj Vidya Raj Guhya Yoga, where we had actually talked about this knowledge, which translated to the yoga of royal knowledge and royal secret. So, royal means the greatest knowledge and the greatest secret. Greatest knowledge because beyond that, nothing remains to be known. With that, let's move on to the next verse, verse 1.2.8. I will read. Na nareण अवरेण प्रोक्तः एषः सुविज्ञेय बहुधा चिन्तयामानः अनन्य प्रोक्ते गति अत्र न अस्ति अणियान ह्यत्य कर्म anupramanat. So the verse translates to, when this is told by a lesser human, it is not properly understood, even after analysis of various aspects. Even when explained by a higher person, it is difficult to understand, since the soul is subtler than the subtlest and is beyond inference and reasoning. So let's take this up word by word. Na is not, Naren is, Nar is human, so Naren becomes by humans. Avaren with lesser intellect, where the intellect is covered, that means it's not functioning at its best. So with lesser intellect, Prokta explained or instructed, Esha, this, the Paramatman, or the eternal soul. Suvigya, easy to be known, Bahuda in various aspects, Chintaya Manaha, to be contemplated upon or analyzed upon. Ananya, not by another. Prokte, when taught, Gati is goal, Atra here, Na Asti is not, there is none. Aniyan, subtler. Hyatya Karyam, which cannot be argued. Anu Pramanat, than the subtlest. So that we are translating the verse to, when this is told by a lesser human, it is not properly understood, even after contemplation of various aspects. Even when explained by a higher one, it is difficult to understand, since the soul is subtler than the subtlest and is beyond inference and reasoning. So let's read it together. Na nareण avareण प्रोक्तः एषः सुविज्ञेय बहुधा चिन्तया मानः अनन्य प्रोक्ते गति अत्र न अस्ति अणियान ह्यत कार्यम अनुप्रमाणात्. So see, in our today's knowledge, contemporary knowledge system, largely driven by the West, because we consider them the epitome of everything. We want evidence and proof of everything. Now, in this knowledge, in the spiritual knowledge or the knowledge of the soul, we are trying to understand that infinite through our finite equipment. And that knowledge cannot be logically explained. So it defies logic. It cannot be proven. So we have to work on subtilizing or purifying ourselves so that our experiences become purer or subtler. And then we will be able to recognize that non-perceptible, which we cannot feel with our senses or experience with our senses. So once we purify ourselves, we become subtle enough to be able to see glimpses of the non-perceptible. And today I'll bring out this out with a few examples later on in one of the next verses. Here, what the verse is saying, that the lower level of teachers or the people who are not very well aware of what they're talking about when we talk of the Paramatman, they tend to explain it in a very slipshod manner, if I may say so. they render it, typically we'll see that they render inactive certain parts of our personality so that our focus doesn't even, get diverted there. And we only follow what the uh, teacher is saying or what the teacher knows. So it's like a trance-like state. So we just follow them. Even those who function or who understand this knowledge or who are at a higher level find it difficult to explain, and therefore we find it difficult to understand because the eternal soul is subtler than the subtlest. This is what Yam says. And therefore, Lord Yam says that this knowledge is difficult to comprehend as it is beyond reasoning. With that, let's move on to the next verse, verse number 1.2.9. I will read. नैषा तर्केण मति आपनेया प्रोक्ता अनन्येन एव सुज्ञानाय प्रेष्ठः याम त्वम आपः सत्यधृति बतासि त्वधक् न भूयात नचिकेता प्रष्टः. So the verse translates to, this knowledge which you have attained is not attainable through reasoning. O dear one, it can only be properly understood when explained by someone who has experienced it. You are of true steadfastness. May we find more inquirers like you. So let's take this up word by word. Nesha, not this. Tarkeen, so tark is reasoning or questioning, argument. Tarkeen therefore becomes by reasoning. Mati, knowledge about the soul. That's the context here. Apneya, attainable. Prokta, one who speaks or says. Anyen, not by another. Ev, indeed. Sugyanai, easy comprehension. Presht is dear one. That's how he's referring to Nachiketa here. Yam, that. Tvam, you. Aap have obtained. Apaha, actually, have obtained. Satya dhriti. Satya is true. Dhriti is steadfastness. So, with true steadfastness, Batasi, you are. Twadrak, like you. Nah, to us. Bhuyat, may there be. Nachiketa, O Nachiketa. Prashtha, one who puts forward the prashn or inquirers. So the verse translates to, this knowledge which you have attained is not attainable through reasoning. O dear one, it can only be properly understood when explained by another who has explained it, who has experienced it. You are of true steadfastness. May we find more inquirers like you. The word that you should be just noticing is anen, not another. Okay. And the previous word used, the word ananya, again, not by another. So both these verses are using these words, and we will discuss that shortly. So let's read it together. Nesha tarken mati apneya प्रोक्ता अनेन एव सुज्ञानाय प्रेष्ठः याम त्वम आपः सत्यधृति बतासि त्वधृक् न भूयात नचिकेता पृष्ठः. So see, once again we find Lord Yam expressing his affection for the genuine and steadfast seeker and the intelligent student Nachiketa. Lord Yam is talking to Nachiketa as if the knowledge has already been communicated to him. Possibly this is because Lord Yam believes that Nachiketa is not only qualified and has the capability to receive it, but also because Nachiketa is unshaken in his desire to seek the ultimate reality. Nachiketa has set that ultimate goal for himself, And he has already rejected all the temptations of wealth and pleasures, which were the limited goals actually, which are offered by Lord Yama. These kind of devotees or seekers are poles apart from others who stop at some point in front of these enjoyments or the fulfillment of desires, or in other worlds. We all, most of us, worship Lord, but our mind stops at some point based on our capabilities or our ability to manage desires, where we become attached to the enjoyment and we stop there. We stagnate at that point. We do not progress on our spiritual journey. It's like the train journey that I had talked. So suppose we sit down, board a train, let's say from New Delhi, and we have to get off at Mumbai. Many stations will pass on the way, and at some station if we find something which fascinates us, and we say, okay, let the train go, I'll go after 2 days maybe, but let me first take care of this thing which is attracting me. So the destination, we have lost sight of the destination. We have got stuck with the whatever we have been attracted to at that railway station. So this is exactly what is being talked about here. The type of devotee that Nachiketa is, he is steadfast in his devotion. And this is the Ananya Bhakti, you know, or the Ananya Chintan. So there is no Ananya Bhakti. There is no other Bhakti. There is no other contemplation. Nachiketa has no relish for anything other than the ultimate truth. We saw in the previous section, he has rejected all things up to the Brahmalok. He found them irrelevant. He discarded them to continue on his path of self realization. Such a devotee is Lord's own. And here again, we come back to Bhagavad Gita. Chapter 9, you may recollect the Raj Vidya Rajaguhya Yoga, verse number 22, which translated to those persons who worship me, thinking of nothing else, to those ever seeking union, I grant them yog and ksham, or yog and supreme bliss. This is what the Lord was telling, Lord Krishna told Arjuna. So, of course, there Krishna is talking from the level of the pure consciousness, and he promises both yog and ksham, or union and bliss, to a true devotee. Yog is attaining what we do not have, and ksham is preserving what we have. So that verse again was very important. You may recollect that occurred at the midpoint of the Bhagavad Gita, and it was considered so at the midpoint, like in a necklace, we always put biggest gem, which is the pride of the necklace. And the verse actually, see, I'll read the verse of Bhagavad Gita. Ananya chintayanto mam ye jana paryupasate tesham nitya abhyuktanam yog kshem vahamya aham. So Lord Krishna promises that I will personally carry my devotees or those who surrender exclusively to me. Our scriptures, so that is one part that God takes responsibility for us, that of the grace of God falling on us. The second important thing is that our scriptures, and this Upanishad in particular, repeatedly keep saying that this knowledge is not obtainable through reasoning, through logic. To obtain this knowledge, we are trying to understand that infinite through our finite equipment. Our equipment is what? Body, mind, and intellect. And of course, the vasanas, so that's the causal body. So all this is finite, and we have to go beyond the realms of our mind and intellect also to be able to have glimpses of that eternal soul. So, I will now draw your attention to chapter 13 of the Bhagavad Gita, which was very important when we were doing the Bhagavad Gita also. And what we are going to, what we will read about today and in the next few sessions actually are a build upon chapter 13, which talked of the Kshetra, Kshetragya, Vibhag Yog, or the yoga of distinction between the field and the knower of the field. So that is what detailed out what we are discussing here. And it is a request that if in your free time during this particular set of verses we are doing, you start going through that chapter. It'll help. Again, I'll draw your attention to verse number 6 of this chapter, which listed the 24 constituents of the kshetra or the field or matter. Okay. So the list goes like this: the great elements, ego, intellect, and also the unmanifest, the 10 senses, and the one, and the five objects of the senses. All these belong to the kshetra. So now let's look at this verse because we need to understand this. This is the structure on which the current verse is actually based, right? So the great elements, five great, Panch Mahabhut, five, ego, six, intellect, seven, unmanifest is the vasanas, eight, 10 senses, 18. Sorry, 10, 18, one which is mind, 19, and the five objects of the senses. So these are the 24 constituents of the kshetra. Now, what we understood in the Bhagavad Gita is that even when we are functioning at the level of the intellect, we are actually in the kshetra, we are in the field. So now, when from my personality, I take out the great elements, ego, intellect, vasanas, senses, mind, and the five objects of senses, of action actually. What remains? So we are going to talk of that which remains after we have taken out all this, which is finite. That is the pure consciousness or the ultimate experiencer. Let's try to understand this. I will try to move from the relative to the subtler, and subtlest is very difficult to move to, but we move into the subtle layers. So see, one shows you the Qutub Minar. So we go in Mehrauli and see the Qutub Minar, and you can actually see it. You can touch it, feel it. So we can show it and write volumes of the on the Qutub Minar, the kind of structure, the kind of bricks that I used, blah blah blah, dating it, which period, and so on and so forth. In the same manner, the pure consciousness or Paramatman cannot be described. That Paramatman is eternal, was always there. There's no question of dating. We cannot touch it and see it, right? So we cannot explain that pure consciousness. Let's try to understand this from the point of view of the kshetra and the kshetragya and the experience, right? So let's take the simplest example. I see a tree. In this experience, sighting a tree or looking at a tree, the tree is the kshetra, is the object. I am the subject, the kshetragya. And then by the contact of the two, the kshetra and the kshetragya, the experience takes place. So I see a tree. So now kshetra is the tree. I am the kshetragya. Next example. My knee hurts. Now what has happened is my knee, the knee is the kshetra. I am the kshetragya and the experience is the hurt. So my knee hurts, right? So knee is also mine. I am also mine. So the kshetra is mine and the kshetragya is mine and the pain is mine, right? So now I'm moving within. Third one. But The knee I can still touch and feel. I can touch my knee and see that it hurts. Third example, I am thinking. I am the kshetra because it's my mind, which is, and I am also the kshetragya. It's happening in me. I am experiencing it. And the experience, what am I experiencing? Whatever I'm thinking about, right? So again, the kshetra, kshetragya, eh, I am both. In the previous example, when I said my knee hurts, the knee was at the gross level, at the body physical level. In this example, now we've moved to the subtle layers. So from the gross, I've moved to the subtle. The kshetra is also subtle, and the experiencer is also subtle, and the experience is also subtle. So the point being brought out is that as the experience, the object, and the subject becomes subtler and subtler, we keep going within ourselves. And the demarcation between the kshetra, the field, and the knower of the field, kshetragya, keeps blurring. One who is discriminative enough to continue with the understanding of this distinction continues to be the knower, the kshetragya. And also in in this same chapter, we said that the Lord Krishna says finally that I am the ultimate experiencer through all the kshetragyas, right? So in our context, in the current context, we have to understand that to experience that eternal soul, we have to be subtle enough to recognize the non-perceptible. If we continue to remain only either at the external level or at our gross body level, we will not be able to reach that Paramatman. And secondly, the other important thing is that if we are driven by the conviction that only that for which we have evidence exists, and that for which evidence, proof, and logic is not available, does not exist, we shall never ever achieve this knowledge, which is subtler than the subtlest. See, logic at the end of the day is an intellectual activity because it is through our intellect that we are trying to understand something. But again, if you read that verse 6, that capacity, that logic is part of the intellect. So it is in the realm of matter, kshetra. So this knowledge cannot come to us by logic. This knowledge can be explained by someone who's rooted in it, who has experienced it, believes it. Someone like Lord Yam himself, whom Nachiketa is fortunate enough to have found. And Lord Yam, of course, is extremely pleased to have a steadfast seeker like Nachiketa. And he says that we wish there were more seekers like him. The use of the word we is also very important. In our tradition, no individual guru claims the copyright or the patent for a particular knowledge because they understand that all this knowledge has is a result of what has been passed down to them through generations. So even in the Bhagavad Gita, so many times Lord Krishna himself says that this was passed from this to this to this, and then it's come to me. So the use of the, so when he talks, when Lord Yam says that we would like to have more inquirers like him, like Nachiketa, it means that teachers like him or people through whom this knowledge has come down to him would be happy to have more inquirers like Nachiketa. With that, let's move on to the next verse, the 10th one. Janamyaham shevadhi iti anityam nahi adhruve praptaye hi dhruvam tat tat maya nachiketah agnichitah anitye dravye prapt vanasmi nityam. So the verse translates to Yam says, I know the wealth is transient. Wealth which we obtain by the result of our actions. So he says, I know the wealth as a result of actions is transient. With transient, the non transient or eternal cannot be obtained. Yet, by performing the Nachiketa fire sacrifice with transient things, I have obtained the eternal. So let's look at this word by word. Janamya aham. So I know. Shevadhi, wealth. Wealth which is a result of our actions. Iti, that. Anityam. Nitya is eternal or always there. Anityam becomes which is not always there or transient, fleeting, perishable. Na, not. He, verily. Adhruve. So dhruv is eternal. Adhruve becomes by the non-eternal. Prapte is obtained. He, for. Dhruvam is eternal. Tat, that. Next line is tat, that. Maya, by me. Nachiketa, Agni. So this refers to the Nachiketa's fire sacrifice. Chittaha is propitiated, having been performed. Anitya. So with the perishable, dravya is things. Praptvanasmi, I have obtained. Nityam, eternal. So the verse is translating to, I know the wealth as a result of action is transient. With transient, the non transient or eternal cannot be obtained. Yet, by performing the Nachiketa fire sacrifice with transient things, I have obtained the eternal. So let's read it together. Janamyaham Shevadhi iti anityam. Nahi adruve prapyate hi druvaham tat. Tat maya nachiketa agni chitta anitye dravye praptvanasmi nityam. So here, Lord Yam is referring to the Nachiketa fire sacrifice that we covered in section 1, verses 15 to 19. So there you remember the Nachiketa's second boon was that he has heard of those places where there's no hunger, thirst, and old age and death. So he wanted to understand how to reach those realms. And so that was covered in these verses 15 to 19 of the previous section. And Lord Yam was, of course, very happy when Nachiketa was able to explain back to him what he had understood, that he decided to name this particular sacrifice to the Nachiketa, attributed to Nachiketa. So when we're talking of Nachiketa Agni, it actually is referring to that fire sacrifice, which has been, again, like in our tradition, it has been performed, but it was not given a name. So Lord Yam was already performing those sacrifices. And also at that point of time, the verse was actually talking about bricks. But we had discussed this in detail, and you can go through the recording, that the bricks mentioned there were not physical bricks or physical constructs, but not non-material constructs. Okay, so they were not at the gross level, but they refer to our mental and intellectual disciplines through processes, adjustments of our consciousness, our personality, and the process of deconditioning ourselves, right? So those bricks were not referring to material weighing X kilograms. They were bricks of consciousness, subtleness, or they were the constructs of consciousness. So we had discussed, we were to interpret it in terms of bricks of consciousness. And the performance of this sacrifice guaranteed the bliss in this life and afterlife. And we may recollect, and I'm just repeating that in the verse 17, we interpreted where it said that one who performs the Nachiketa fire sacrifice 3 times. So that 3 times interpretation is through Shravan, Manan, and Dhyan, combining with knowledge which we imbibe from the 3 Vedas, Rig, Yajur, and Sam, perform our 3 duties of Yajna, Tap, and Dan, or sacrifice, austerity, and charity. One is able to purify oneself so that one is able to meditate on God and thereby cross over the cycle of birth and death and attain moksha or the supreme bliss. Essentially, when we perform physical and mental actions, karma, mindful of God and meditate, then we start getting to know ourselves. This is what we call adhyatma, and also start getting glimpses of God, that Brahman. And of course, in the heavens, we analyzed and we read that there is no fear. Neither do we suffer from physical ailments like hunger, thirst, etc., nor do we have old age and death. And in verse number 18, we read that one who understands these bricks of consciousness or the constructs of consciousness, their number and arrangement, that person removes the shackle of death right here and right now. Right? So we can experience the immeasurable bliss of heaven or the state of supreme bliss. So through this sacrifice, which is through our what? Through our ego, the same that Kshetragya verse, the great elements, ego, intellect, and also our vasanas, 10 senses, one mind, and the five objects of our senses, or on which the senses go and rest. So all this is in the matter, in the realm of matter. So it is finite, it is perishable. But when we do the sacrifice, mindful in the spirit of service and sacrifice, so understanding the knowledge that is coming to us from the three Vedas, through listening, contemplating, and then reflecting on Paramatman, we do our duties of sacrifice, austerity, and charity. Then we are able to attain the immeasurable bliss of heaven or the state of supreme bliss through this sacrifice, which is performed with our finite, perishable wealth or capabilities, right? So that is how, this is how the verse is to be understood. And with that, we move on to the last verse of the day, verse number 11. Kamasya apitam, apitam actually, kamasya apitam jagatah pratishtham krato ananyatayam abhasya param stom mahat urugayam pratishtham drishtva dhritaya dhir nachiketa atyastrakshi. So the verse translates to the fulfillments of desire, foundation of this world, endless rewards of sacrifice, realm of no fear, great adoration and status, praised by many, the foundation of the universe. O Nachiketa, you evaluated, and being wise, you rejected. So this is continuing. This is just a summary of the and section one when Nachiketa, after Nachiketa asks for his third boon. So all these the prayer path was laid out by Lord Yam in front of Nachiketa in exchange for the third boon into which we are, which Nachiketa, these temptations, Nachiketa evaluated and he rejected. And he said, no, I will continue with my third boon as it is, because that is what needs to be. That is what is of eternal value to me. So let's take this up word by word. Kamasya, of desires. Apitam, the fulfillment. Jagat is, of course, the world. Pratishtham is the foundation. Krato, of sacrifice. Anantayam, endless rewards. Abhyasya, so abhay is without fear. Abhyasya becomes of fearlessness. Param, the other shore, the other side, beyond. Stom, praiseworthy. Mahat, great. Arugayam, wide extended sphere of influence, actually. Pratishtham, again, foundation, abode of the soul. Drishtva, having seen. Dhritya, with firm resolve. Dhir, wise one. Nachiketa, of course, referring to Nachiketa. Atyastrakshi, you rejected. So, the fulfillment of desires, foundation of this world, endless rewards of sacrifices, realm of no fear, great adoration and status, praised by many, The foundation of the universe, O Nachiketa, you evaluated, being wise, you rejected. So let's read it together. Kamasya apitam jagatah pratishtham krato anantayam abhayasya param stom mahat arugayam pratishtham drishtva dhritaya dhir nachiketa atyastrakshi. So we have been repeating this, that in the previous section, Nachiketa laid out, Lord Yam laid out the prayer path before Nachiketa. He offered all the wealth and the pleasures of not only the mortal world, but also those of the heavens. And you can recollect that we can classify these temptations into four, actually three worldly categories, and the fourth is that of the heaven. So the temptations of progeny, children and grandchildren, wealth and comforts, amenities, power, you rule over a lot of, have a, kingdom or domain, so power and status. And the last was, of course, that of the attainment of heaven. And if you see, when we are praying, and normally after a prayer, we always are asking for something or the other, whatever we are asking for will fall in one of these categories, right? And we also saw that in each case, Nachiketa evaluated each thing that was offered to him by Lord Yam, and he gave Lord Yam, because after all, he was rejecting what Lord Yam was giving him. He gave complete logic to Lord Yam as to why he was rejecting whatever the temptation that Lord Yam was placing before him. And he pursued on the path of salvation and proved to be a perfect candidate for Lord Yam's teaching.